Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Stone Chapel Podcast. I'm David Capes. Esau McCaulley is going to join me in a few minutes to talk about a lecture he's going to be giving at the Lanier Theological Library in Houston. It's going to be October the 12th, 2024. The title of that lecture is The Gospels and the Anti-Slavery Movement. Now, before he joins me, my friend Ed Stetzer has a word about a research project that would benefit you and me and really all of us. Ed?
You know, it's a changing world, and one of the things that help us understand the changing world is research. And so as churches have been struggling and families may be disconnected and sometimes drifting away from the church, we're kind of dealing with some of the questions of where do we go from here? And the Communio nationwide survey on faith and relationships really kind of points to the family decline and how it relates to faith decline in the United States. Actually, the survey has three key issues that are impacting our society today. Go to communio.org/study to download the nationwide study on faith and relationships.
Hey, thanks, Ed. The Stone Chapel Podcast is part of the Church Leaders Podcast Network. This network is dedicated to providing church leaders with resources to help them face all the complexities of ministry these days. The Church Leaders Podcast Network is supporting pastors and ministry leaders by challenging some of their assumptions and providing insights and training and offering some practical steps that will help church leaders navigate a variety of cultures and contexts. You can learn more about that at ChurchLeaders.com/podcast network. Esau McCaulley is a New Testament colleague at Wheaton College. He's coming to lecture at Lanier Theological Library in Houston, October the 12th, 2024. His topic is the Gospels and the Anti-Slavery Movement. Esau McCaulley is uniquely qualified. He's really gifted to talk about this topic for a lot of reasons. Many of those are going to become evident in the next 15 minutes. So today, father, husband, scholar, writer, international speaker, and New York Times columnist, Esau McCaulley, on the Stone Chapel Podcast. All right, joining me today is Esau McCaulley, professor at Wheaton College, associate professor of New Testament at Wheaton College. He worked with N.T. Wright, our friend, from the University of St. Andrews.
University of St. Andrews.
Yeah, welcome. We're so glad that you're here.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm enjoying it. It's a beautiful, beautiful space.
Yeah, and you've had a chance to enjoy our Yarnton property as well.
Yes. How many people have done both? I'm
Not many.
I'm double duty. So yeah, I've been to the Yarnton space.
You are twice blessed.
And I got to go back once the library is finished there so I can see it fully operational.
Hey, we're going to be talking about your commentary that you led, this great project.
Yeah.
And it's called The New Testament in Color, a multi-ethnic Bible commentary.
Yes.
Tell me about this project.
My first book looked at the contributions of the African American church to understanding Christianity in America and the distinctive ways in which African Americans have read the Bible and made sense of it. And so when I wrote that book, it was supposed to be a part one of a two-part series, but a lot of people bought the first book and people buy a book, then people ask you to talk about it, then people attack it, and you got to defend it. So it took a little bit more time to kind of help people understand what I did and didn't mean by African American biblical interpretation. And maybe I'll talk about that for a second to help you understand New Testament in color.
That was one of my questions down the way. Let's talk a little bit about that because you wrote the chapter on that here.
Yes. When we think about African American biblical interpretation, you can get this idea in your head that I think that like skin color creates interpretations of the Bible. Like there's something in the melanin that makes you a magical Bible interpreter. That's not what I mean at all. What I mean is the color of your skin impacts the way that you're treated. And when you're treated a certain way, it raises certain kinds of questions that you then go to the Bible and answer. A good example of that is that I say a lot of African Americans are told that Christianity is a white man's religion. So we have to show from the Bible that Christianity isn't a white man's religion. But I doubt that most of my pastors in white churches have had people come and say, you know what, Christianity is a black man's religion. Prove to me that it isn't. And so the questions that are raised in an African-American context aren't the same questions that are raised in different contexts. The other example that I use is, say it's 1954. And Brown versus Board of Education has just passed. And now African Americans are thinking through how we're going to be Christians in this new context, the kinds of questions they might ask. Now consider this also 1954, but it's in an all-white pro-segregation congregation. And the pastor has to stand up from the Bible and make the case. Different context produces different questions. Now you're still turning to the Bible for answers. The Bible is still the authority, but the kinds of questions that you ask are influenced by your context. And sometimes, because of your context, you ask questions that lead to insights that people might not otherwise notice. Another example that I give is, say, for example, you're getting ready to teach a youth group and you're looking through the Bible and you're thinking, what's a good message to say to 15-year-olds? And because 15-year-olds are in your head, you say, oh, I see exactly how this part in Paul would speak exactly to the experiences of someone who's 15 or 16. And those insights are there, but you didn't notice them because in your mind, you only think about preaching to adults. So in actuality, the people who you imagine when you read the Bible influence the kinds of things that you notice, and it influences the kinds of things that you bring out of the text. So if we only have one group of people in mind when we interpret the Bible, it leads to the possibility that we don't see things that are there. So I'm not talking about distorted meanings, I'm talking about motivated readings. The things that you notice because you're attending to them based upon your experiences. Maybe another example of this, not to belabor the point, let's say you're a woman and you're told that women are intellectually inferior. You ask the question, hey, what does the Bible actually say about women? And as a woman, you might be really motivated to get this right because this matters for who you are. So what I mean is that motivated readings aren't necessarily bad. Sometimes they can help us, or sometimes they can hinder us. Motivated readings are a fact of all reality. And African Americans in the United States have had unique experiences that have required us to answer questions that other communities haven't. And there's a deposit of reflections that have arisen from a community that we call the Black church that have formed habits of reading. And so that's what we call African American biblical interpretation. Not skin color producing readings, but skin color produces experiences that we then bring to the text that then influence our reading. And so if that is true of African Americans, it's also true of people from other cultures. Mm-hmm. And so we thought that what happens if you bring different cultures together to create a commentary that itself reflects what the church is supposed to be. People from every tribe, tongue, and nation reading the Bible together to make sense of it. So the New Testament in color is Black, white, Asian, and Latino scholars who are together working on a commentary on the New Testament. Not that we all did each one individually, but each person did kind of a commentary. So we have actually people, we have Native American peoples, First Nations, Indigenous peoples, African Americans, Asian Americans, Latinos, and white scholars. And we want to focus on North American minorities. So we saw things like the Asia Bible Commentary and these other things. And there were more Bible commentaries that were looking at, in evangelicalism, let's listen to the voice of the global church. And we said, it's really great. You should listen to the global church. African Bible Commentary, the Asia Bible Commentary, these things are important. But what about the ethnic minorities in our midst? What we wanted to do was to create something that brought together the ethnic minorities in the United States, along with the majority culture, because white is a culture, and bring them together to create a commentary.
So there are white scholars here.
Yes.
As well as Black scholars.
Gene Green is in there.
Gene Green is in here.
Michael Gorman's in there.
Mike Gorman. So
Amy Peeler is one of the editors.
Amy Peeler, yeah. So Janet Oak, tell us about Janet.
Janet Oak is an Asian American scholar at Fuller Seminary. She focuses on, I think 2 Peter is her
First
area.
and 2 Peter. Yeah.
But she's also working on a commentary right now on,
I think it's all three.
yes, all three Johns and New International
Commentary.
on the New Testament or whatever.
Yeah.
So she's working on that. She is an accomplished scholar, associate professor at Fuller. He's published tons of stuff. Amy Peeler is a colleague at Wheaton. Sorry, Wheaton. We love Wheaton. Amy is a Hebrew scholar. And she also deals a lot with gender and is helping us understand how the Bible describes women and the gifts that God has given to women, and how the church needs to embrace the entire body of Christ to do effective ministry. Great New Testament scholar. She did a commentary on Hebrews. Her commentary on Hebrews just came out sometime recently. So then there's Osvaldo Padilla. He's a Latino scholar at Beeson Divinity School.
Which is in Alabama.
In Alabama, God's country. And he is working on a commentary on the pastorals. And I don't know if that one's out yet either, but he's.
I don't think it is. He's written some on Acts as well, Book of Acts.
Yeah, but he's currently working on the pastorals.
Yeah.
So all of them are accomplished scholars. Well, we wanted three things from the people who participated. One, we want to say, we want you to affirm the scripture is the final authority for Christians' faith and practice. So although we agree to disagree on a lot of stuff, we wanted to say, hey, you agree on the Bible. The second thing we said was we wanted the creeds to function as the consensus around Christian belief as well. So the Nicene Creed, the Apostles' Creed, we said, okay, there's a bunch of denominations here, but we think the creeds are a good summary of what it means to be a Christian. So if you say you're pro-creed and you say you like the Bible, you could be in the commentary. Beyond that, we gave people freedom. And we also said we didn't want people to speak for their entire ethnicity. Like, I'm not speaking for Black people, but I'm a Black person speaking from that perspective. Like, this is not the Black view on A, B, and C. It's more of a person who's being unapologetically themselves in the interpretive process.
So let's talk a little bit about your own journey, growing up in Alabama.
Yeah.
Your own experience. You born in the 70s, I take it?
I like to call myself a child of the 70s.
70s, okay.
I was born in October of 79.
79.
So I've seen the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and the 2020s. 6 decades.
Wow.
6 decades.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just barely, though, 70s.
That month and a half or 2.5 months in the 70s was a wild time.
Wild time, yeah. Long hair,
all
that stuff.
Back in those days.
So talk about your journey toward faith.
I think that a lot of the times I talk more about decisions for Jesus than a decision for Jesus. I feel like a significant part of my spiritual journey is over time giving over more and more of my life to God. Because I was raised in a Christian home. My grandparents on both sides of my family were Baptist ministers. My mom's a minister. She became a minister after I did, so I always say she followed me into ministry. She got ordained like a couple of years ago. But we were in church every Sunday. In my family, we were kind of from a rough part of the town. And so we kind of tended towards binaries. You were either like in the church or in the streets. And so I was in the church, but the levels of my piety kind of waxed and waned over the years. And so I used to say, I had this idea, and this is true. I didn't say it out loud to the pastor, but I'll come to church on Sunday and say, okay, like, if you preach a good sermon, I'm gonna be a Christian that week. If you don't, you lost me. I've always kept that with me because I know what it's like to go into church and say, if I don't hear a word from God today, I don't know what's gonna happen. That was most of my childhood. And I would say that for me, Christianity was, at periods in my life, more of a survival mechanism. It was the way out of my neighborhood. And maybe I can say, to make a very long story short, is that I remember I went to college and I was a college football player, Division III at the University of the South. And it was shocking to go from the poverty of my high school to college at the University of the South, where there was so much money and so much wealth. And they joke because, like, they have these things in football called two-a-days, where you practice twice a day. Tennessee, where it's super hot. And I was the only person who actually ever gained weight during two-a-day because I never had that much food in my life. And you could just go to the cafeteria and eat whenever you want. I couldn't believe it. So I just kept eating. But one of the things that I realized is that, like, after I was no longer in this place where I didn't recognize my need for God, I said, oh, God had done what he needed to do. He got me to college. And I was in college, and it was a more theologically progressive place where I took the religion classes that told you that none of this stuff was true and all of that kind of stuff that you hear as a stereotype. It's really good to tell a college student that God doesn't care what you do. So it wasn't like it was that intellectually stimulating. It was like there's fraternity houses down the road and the professor's telling me I can do what I want. That's a toxic mix for a college student. And I kind of drifted away from my faith for a little bit in college. And then there came this particular moment in college. It was Christmas break. This is what I'll say is a significant spiritual moment in my life. Christmas break, and I'm back in my room, but it's no longer mine because when you leave our house, there was not enough bedrooms. So it was my sister's bedroom. Everything's pink now. But I was back for Christmas break and I was listening to, sounds really sad, but I was listening to like Etta James, like old school, and Billie Holiday, like this sad jazz music on this thing called Napster. If you're a certain age, you remember when you could download illegal music before they were streaming. And I wasn't praying or anything. I'm just listening to sad jazz music because I had everything that I wanted in college. I was no longer worried about what I was going to eat. I was doing well in school. I was doing well in sports. And I was not praying. I was just listening to depressing jazz music because it felt like it matched my mood. I had this idea that I think comes from God. It was like a sentence, like fully formed. What happens when you receive everything you ever wanted, but it's not sufficient to bring you joy? And I said, that has summarized my college experience. And then like the answer to the question that it posed, like if the Spirit put that question, the answer was, well, maybe you should try God and take him seriously. And so that was the spiritual transformation. But because I had been in college and I had all of the intellectual stuff had been taken away from me, I had to like go through this process of reading myself. Like I had to say, I know I've had this experience of God, but now I have to make intellectual sense of this. And actually the study to make sense of what I'd experienced spiritually led me down the road to becoming ultimately an academic, to begin to answer those questions that I had received in those courses. Someone asked me, oh, it was Janine. I think she asked me like, what is it that I like doing the most? And I said, talking to students about the Bible and giving them the confidence to live their lives on the basis of these texts. Because I know what it's like to have a professor whose goal was to take that away from students.
Deconstruct it.
I wanted to give that back to students. To say, we are not fools for trusting in the God revealed in these texts. And so that's a little bit of my spiritual journey.
Great story. Great stories. It's great to have Esau McCaulley with us today. Been hoping to have him on for a while now. Join us for the lecture that he's going to be giving in Houston on October the 12th, 2024. You can go to laniertheologicallibrary.org, that website. Scroll down a bit and find the event and register. We have limited seating, so you've got to register. If you can't be with us in person, you can be with us by streaming the event live. Thanks to all those who make this podcast possible. You know who you are. Until next time, I'm David Capes. Thanks for listening.
You know, if you listen to the podcast, you know that I love research. I used to lead a research company. So I love when research helps to illustrate a question we have. And one of the questions a lot of people are having is, how do we look to the decline of the family, maybe the relationship around fatherhood and issues of faith and church? Well, again, the Communio nationwide study on faith and relationships actually points to the collapse of marriage, where resident fatherhood fits into that, and how they all point ultimately to a relationship to Christianity and decline in the church. So visit communio.org/study to download Communio's nationwide study on faith and relationships.